Hello. This is Advanced Algebra 1 for 5th period. Let's see if I have anyone on. It says I have one person watching, but it doesn't show me who it is. All right, that one person left. So it looks like it's just me all by myself. That's okay. Because hopefully all of my Advanced Algebra 1 students will be watching this later. Because I know you're doing your work. I know you're learning. And I know you're not cheating. Because y'all are great kids. So, today, we are still, well, actually, we've only done one lesson in quadratic equations, but we're going to be on quadratics for a long time. There's a whole big list that we're going to be working on IXL. This is a very important chapter, and I hope all of you are really trying to learn this because it is important. It's important to Algebra 2, especially to the ACT test. So please do this whole section on quadratics that we're getting involved with. You learned in our last lesson how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. And the whole reason that we are going to learn how to solve quadratic equations is because the answers you get when you solve give you important points on your graph of a quadratic function. It gives you the x-intercepts, like on this. We are going to learn other ways to solve those quadratic equations besides just factoring, because not everything can always be factored. But before we learn the other ways, we're going to learn about graphs of quadratic functions. So our goal today is to name parts of a quadratic function by looking at its graph. First of all, parabola. That's an important term to know. Parabola is called, or is the graph of a quadratic function. Okay, so the graph of a quadratic function is called a parabola. When you have a parabola, you have specific points that will help you draw the graph. When you find those points, you can plot them and draw the graph. And so we're going to go over what those points are in this graph where I've got some things labeled. If you'll notice on this parabola, here's your y-axis and here's your x-axis. And I've got this point labeled. It's just like on a linear function. Wherever your graph crosses the y-axis, that is the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is always on the y-axis, and it's always the y-coordinate of that point, because the x-coordinate is always 0. So the y-intercept is the y-coordinate on that point on the y-axis. You have these x-intercepts where your parabola crosses the x-axis, and sometimes there's only one x-intercept. Sometimes there's no x-intercepts in special occasions. But most of the time there are two intercepts, because most of the time your parabola is going to go down across the x-axis and then back up, or either if it's turned upside down, it would basically do the same thing, except it would be turned the other way, and you would still have two x-intercepts. All right, so you have your y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis. You have your x-intercepts where the parabola crosses the x-axis. You have the vertex, and the vertex is a really, really important point, and it's where your parabola starts going back in the other direction. So like on this one, if the parabola is going, if you trace my pen along and you're starting up here at the top and you go down to this, hit this point, and then it curves and starts going back up, that point where it starts going back in the opposite direction is the vertex. And that vertex is always at the very lowest point on the parabola or the very highest point, but it's always in the center. And it's in the center of your parabola on this dotted line. And this dotted line is an imaginary line. It's not really drawn there, that's why it's dotted. But it always divides your parabola into two mirror images. It goes always vertical, and it's always straight down the center to where you have two mirror images on your parabola. And that is called the axis of symmetry. That's what it says here, axis of symmetry. And that's a vertical line. All right, so you have your y-intercept, your x-intercepts, your vertex, and your axis of symmetry. Today we're going to just go over how to pick out your y-intercept, your vertex, your axis of symmetry, and then if you'll shift your eyes over here and look at what I've got drawn over here, you're going to also be told to name the minimum and maximum values on a parabola. So if you'll look, if your parabola is turned up, where your arrows are going up, if it's turned up, your vertex is the lowest point on that parabola. And so that point, the y-coordinate of that point is your minimum value. That's going to be the lowest value if you're looking at it going up and down. So if you'll look at this vertex, you just look over here to the left where that is on the y-axis, and that's going to be the y-coordinate, which is your minimum value. If your parabola is turned down, that means the arrows are going down. The vertex is at the top. And so that means that that is a maximum point. And on that maximum point, the maximum value is the y-coordinate. So again, you would just look over to see where that point is on the y, where it's even on the y-axis, and that y-coordinate then is going to be your maximum value. That'll make more sense to you whenever we do examples with those. All right, let's look at example 1. On example 1, I have this parabola drawn, and I'll give you just a minute if anybody is going to be copying this down. I'll give you just a minute to kind of draw that. And if you'll look at these directions right here, it says name the y-intercept, part A, name the y-intercept, and part B, name the vertex. I think the hardest thing about this is making sure you enter it right in IXL. Make sure you know when you're entering just one number, and when you're entering an equation, and when you're entering an ordered pair. And so you're going to have to read your directions carefully to know what it tells you. If it says name the y-intercept, remember, the y-intercept is just the y-coordinate of the point where it crosses the y-axis. So this point right here is 0, -3. That's what this point is, where your parabola crosses the y-axis. So the y-intercept is just going to be -3. All you put is -3. And that is your answer for y-intercept. All right, vertex. Name the vertex. On your IXL and on any time, if you were just doing worksheets for me, the vertex is always going to be an ordered pair. And I believe on IXL it gives you something like this, and you just fill in those blanks for your X and your Y coordinate. So look at this graph. Your vertex is this point right here, and that point is -1, -4. So you would just say -1, -4. That's your vertex. So the y-intercept is just a number. It's just the number where it crosses the y-axis. Your vertex is an ordered pair. -1, -4 in this case. Okay, example 2. Now look at this one. Here is my parabola. It's turned down. It says, name the equation for the axis of symmetry. Remember, the axis of symmetry is an imaginary vertical line that goes to the center of your parabola. And so you've actually got an imaginary line here. And remember, vertical lines are always written as x equals something. So when it says the equation, you've got to make sure you put x equals. And I went through your IXL and I entered the axis of symmetry, the number without the equation, and it counted it wrong. So make sure you enter the equation, x equals. It's always x equals. And then you just name where this dotted line is going through. It's going through -1 in this case. Here's 0. This is -1. So that's going to be x equals -1. And that is your answer. All right, let's go on to example 3. Let me see if this is in view. Taryn is watching. Hey, Taryn. I don't know when you joined. If you missed the first... Did you miss the first 2 examples? Or were you here? I've got to wait a minute for you to answer me because there is a delay in the comments. Well, it looks like Taryn left. You left me, Taryn. All right, example 3. Let me slide this down. It looks like it's dark. All right, on example 3, look at this parabola. And look over here, I've got 3 parts, A, B, and C. First thing is to name the vertex. So look over here at your parabola. Remember, the vertex is the point at the very bottom or the very top if it's turned the other way. But it's the point at the very bottom in the center. So that point is 0, -1. 0, -1. Then it says name the equation for the axis of symmetry. Remember, the axis of symmetry is always x equals. And then it is just going to be the x coordinate where the line goes through your vertex. Okay, so x equals 0. And if that didn't make sense to you, your number for your axis of symmetry is always going to be the x coordinate in the vertex. X equals 0. Now it says, what is the minimum value? Remember from the notes on the first page, the minimum value is always going to be the y coordinate in that vertex, the lowest y value in the whole problem. So it's going to be -1. And that's just the number -1. All right, moving on to example 4. I have to apologize for my parabola. That parabola is really bad. That's not how parabolas look. This is too straight in here. But I was just trying to make my points work together, and it looks bad. But I think you'll see what I wanted you to see. First of all, it says name the y-intercept. Okay, so the y-intercept is over here on the y-axis, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the y-intercept is just 5. The maximum value is always going to be the y-coordinate of your vertex. Okay, so this vertex is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is 2, 9 is that point. That's your vertex. It doesn't ask for your vertex. It says what's the maximum value. So that's going to be that y-coordinate of that point, which is 9. And then this is our last example, example 5. Let's slide this up a little. For example 5, it says name the following. This is just a review of everything we've done. The Y-intercept, the vertex, the axis of symmetry, and the minimum value. So this one problem kind of gets it all. Here's my parabola. The Y-intercept is going to be the Y coordinate on the Y-axis, which is 1, 2, 3. So the Y-intercept is 3. The vertex is going to be this point that's in the center at the bottom of the parabola. And that point is -2, -1. The axis of symmetry is always going to be an equation, and it's the equation for this vertical line that goes through the vertex. And so that's going to be x equals, and then remember, it's just the x coordinate of your vertex, which is -2 in this case. X equals -2. And then the minimum value is going to be the y coordinate of the vertex, and the y coordinate is -1. And that's it. That's all this lesson is. I see you're there, Taryn. Do you have any questions? You need me to go back over any examples? On your IXL, it's going to show you graphs like this, and it's just going to tell you to name something, and then you're just going to have to enter that. This is really easy. This should be an easy lesson for you to get a 100 on, and if you get a 100, remember I give you bonus points. So your assignment is Algebra 1 on your IXL, BB1, and get a SMART score of 80. And our next lesson will be on Thursday. Y'all take care and email me if you need any help. Bye.